When you study the lives of the wealthy, those who have built fortunes not through chance or inheritance, but through vision, discipline, and persistence, you begin to notice something subtle yet profoundly consistent. It's not luck. It's not merely talent. It's certainly not a secret handshake or a mysterious code locked away in a vault. What you'll discover if you look closely is a mental habit, a specific way of thinking that repeats itself across time, geography, and industry. And if we were to distill this habit down to its core, we'd find it rooted in how a person sees the world and themselves. The wealthy don't merely accumulate money, they cultivate a way of thinking that makes wealth an inevitable byproduct. They wake up with purpose. They see problems as puzzles, not punishments. They assume personal responsibility where others blame. And most of all, they think in terms of cause and effect. They understand that every outcome is the result of a preceding thought, decision, and action. Now compare this with the average person, often reactive, often focused on immediate comfort, often blaming external forces for internal dissatisfaction. This is not said to condemn, but to clarify. The mental habit that separates the wealthy from the poor is this: the habit of thinking in long-term consequences rather than short-term emotions. Let me tell you a truth that has shaped the destinies of millions, whether they knew it or not. Every human being is operating by a set of mental programs. You are too. Right now, your thoughts are being filtered through patterns you may not even be aware of. Some of these patterns serve you, others sabotage you, and among the most powerful of these patterns is the one that governs how you approach time, effort, and reward. The wealthy, those who rise above circumstance, habitually delay gratification. They ask, "What will this cost me in the long run?" While the poor often ask, "What feels good right now?" It's not about moral superiority, it's about results. One group has trained the mind to think in terms of future benefit. The other has trained the mind to avoid present discomfort. And herein lies the great divide. This single habit, this internal framing of decision-making determines whether a person builds, creates, saves, invests, grows, or whether they consume, complain, react, escape, and wait for someone else to change things. You see, wealth is not an event, it's a process, and that process is built on a long series of what may seem like small, almost invisible decisions repeated over time with discipline. There's a story I once heard about two farmers. Each was given the same plot of land, the same weather, the same tools. One farmer planted and cultivated daily, while the other delayed, distracted himself, and waited for better conditions. When harvest season came, the difference was dramatic. Not because one was luckier, but because one had mastered the habit of thinking ahead. The mind of the wealthy works the same way. It asks, "What seeds am I planting today that my future self will thank me for?" This is the essential contrast between poverty and prosperity, not merely in financial terms, but in mental conditioning. The poor mind waits for a signal. The wealthy mind creates one. The poor mind looks for a reason to stop. The wealthy mind finds a reason to continue. If you want to begin that shift, ask yourself now, in the past 24 hours, how many of your choices were made to benefit your future self? How many of your thoughts were focused on where you're going rather than where you've been? This is not a rhetorical exercise, it's a mirror. And if you're brave enough to look into it, you'll begin to see whether your thinking is leading you toward wealth or away from it. Now consider this truth. Most people are trained by society to think reactively. From school to social media, the average individual is taught to respond, not to reflect. And when you are always reacting, you are never building. You're drifting. You become a leaf in the wind rather than the one steering the ship. That's why this mental habit, this long-term orientation, is so powerful. It gives you back the helm of your own life. You stop drifting from one emotion to the next, one trend to the next, one crisis to the next, and instead you begin designing your direction. You begin to wake up with a vision, not just a list of tasks. You begin to say no to what doesn't serve the future version of you, and that's when change happens. Not because the world suddenly gave you permission, but because you gave yourself permission to start living like someone who matters, someone with purpose, someone who is not afraid to walk alone if that's what it takes to stay aligned with their goals. Let me ask you now, when you think of wealth, what comes to mind? For most, it's a bank account, a car, a home, a title, but wealth begins long before the money appears. It begins as a mental orientation toward creation, service, and sacrifice. It's the quiet choice to stay up late learning something new, the decision to invest instead of spend, the instinct to take responsibility when others point fingers. These choices may seem small, insignificant even, but like compound interest, they accumulate, and one day they show up in your bank account, your relationships, your confidence. Wealth is not what you chase, it's what you build, thought by thought, habit by habit, day by day. If you want to become wealthy, don't focus on the money, focus on the mindset that money responds to. Because here's the truth, money is a symptom, the cause is how you think. Now let's bring this even closer to home. Look at your current financial situation. Look at your schedule, your habits, your daily environment. These are not accidents. They are reflections of thought patterns repeated over time. If you want to change the external, you must first change the internal. That's where most people get it wrong. They wait for external change to validate internal transformation, but the flow is the other way around. You must first become the person who earns more, contributes more, builds more. Then the results follow. The poor wait for evidence. The wealthy act from identity. So today, ask not what do I want, but rather who must I become? And once you answer that, start living in alignment with it. Because the mind works like a thermostat. Once it's set, it brings your reality into harmony with its expectations. Set it low, and life will comply. Set it high, and the world starts to stretch to meet your standards. And here's something else to consider. When you adopt the wealthy mental habit, you begin to take control of time. You stop wasting it on things that don't matter. You stop exchanging your hours for distractions, opinions, and fleeting comfort. Instead, every hour becomes an investment. Every minute has a mission. That doesn't mean you never rest. It means your rest is earned. It's purposeful. The wealthy live by a principle that the poor ignore. Discipline now creates freedom later. Every sacrifice today multiplies into strength tomorrow. And so they choose the pain of discipline over the pain of regret. They build systems, not excuses. They write goals, not complaints. They think in decades, not days. And they're willing to look foolish for a season if it means building a life of quiet power and lasting legacy. This is the shift. This is the turn. And it begins with one internal decision. I will no longer live for now. I will live for next. So wherever you are in life, whether you're just beginning or you've been on this journey a long time, know this. You are only one mental shift away from a radically different future. And that shift begins with how you think about time, choices, and consequences. Wealth is not reserved for a few. It is the natural reward for those who align their thinking with universal laws. Think cause and effect. Think sowing and reaping. Think identity and consequence. And above all, remember this. You do not need permission to become who you were meant to be. Start now. And if this message lit a fire within you, share it. Pass it on. Let it ripple into someone else's life. Because when we change how we think, we don't just change our future, we inspire others to do the same. There is a principle that governs all achievement, whether financial, personal, or spiritual, and that principle is cause and effect. The wealthy understand this not as theory but as law. They see their results not as luck or coincidence but as direct consequences of how they think, what they believe, and what they consistently do. This isn't philosophy, it's physics applied to life. Every thought is a cause, every belief an amplifier, every action a trigger, and together these create the effects we see in a person's life. Wealth or poverty, fulfillment or frustration, clarity or chaos. The poor often ignore this chain. They focus only on the final result, what's in the bank, what's on the table, without tracing the steps that created it. They say things like, it's just not my time, or I guess some people are lucky, failing to realize that every result has a trail, and that trail begins in the mind. You cannot plant weeds and expect roses. You cannot live on accident and expect excellence. The wealthy live in alignment with this law. They reverse engineer success. They think, if I want this outcome, what habits must precede it? What thoughts must fuel it? What identity must support it? They move with design, not default. Let's get even more specific. There is a particular mental habit that reinforces cause and effect thinking. It is the habit of responsibility. Not partial, not occasional, total responsibility. The wealthy take ownership for everything in their world. If something goes wrong, they don't point fingers. They ask, where did I allow this? What belief or decision opened the door? This habit may sound harsh to the untrained mind, but it is the foundation of power. Because when you take responsibility, you gain leverage, you gain access, you reclaim the driver's seat. The poor mindset, by contrast, is built on blame. It blames the economy, the boss, the system, the parents, the past. And while there may be truth in those factors, blaming them transfers power away from the individual, and what you give away you can no longer control. Responsibility, then, is not about guilt, it is about agency. It is the wealthy man saying, I am where I am because of what I've accepted, and I will change it by what I now decide. This is the turning point in every success story. The moment someone stops waiting and starts owning, this level of responsibility extends even to thought. The wealthy understand that they are responsible not only for their behavior, but also for the thoughts they entertain. They do not tolerate self-pity. They do not dwell in doubt. When a disempowering thought enters the mind, they confront it, they question it, they reframe it, because they know that unchecked thought becomes unconscious action, and unconscious action creates unintended consequences. This is why their inner world is so disciplined. While others argue for their limitations, the wealthy rehearse their possibilities. They speak to themselves as one would to a trusted apprentice, with firmness, clarity, and expectation. If a thought weakens them, they discard it. If it strengthens them, they engrave it. This is not about blind optimism, it's about mental integrity. It's about building a mind that supports the life you say you want, and that requires vigilance. The mind, left untrained, will drift toward comfort, fear, and familiarity. But the mind, when directed, becomes a weapon for creation. This is the daily work of the wealthy. Not just doing more, but thinking better. Now let's talk about vision. The wealthy carry in their mind a picture of the life they are building. It is vivid, it is detailed, it is non-negotiable. They don't just hope for things to work out, they design outcomes in advance, and they return to that vision daily, like a captain checks the map before steering the ship. That image becomes a blueprint, and that blueprint guides behavior. The poor often live without a clear vision. They drift, they react, they repeat, and then they wonder why their life looks the same year after year. Vision is not luxury, it is necessity. Without it, there is no direction. Without direction, there is no growth. And without growth, there is decay. The mind is either moving forward or falling backward. There is no neutral. So ask yourself now, can you describe in detail the life you are building? Where are you headed? Who are you becoming? What does it feel like, look like, sound like? If your answers are vague, so will be your results. Clarity creates movement, and the clearer your vision, the quicker your path. Once the wealthy have their vision, they align their behavior with it. This is another habit that seems obvious but is often neglected: congruence. The wealthy strive to become the person who matches their vision before the vision becomes reality. They act as if the goal is already true. If they envision themselves as disciplined, they wake up early. If they see themselves as generous, they give. If they see themselves as leaders, they lead, even when no one's watching. This is not performance. It is identity rehearsal. It is becoming in advance of receiving. The poor often wait. They say, once I have the money, I'll start saving. Or once I have time, I'll start building. But wealth doesn't work that way. The world responds to who you are, not what you want. And the only way to change your reality is to change how you see and conduct yourself right now. That's the habit. That's the hidden advantage. Become before arrival. Think before proof. Move before momentum. And then watch how the world begins to bend in your direction. Let's shift our focus now to language. Words are not mere sounds. They are programming tools. They build beliefs. They shape identity. And the wealthy are intentional with how they speak, both to others and to themselves. They avoid language that weakens. They don't say, I can't. They say, how can I? They don't say, I hope. They say, I decide. Every word is chosen with care, because they know the mind listens. And once the mind hears something often enough, it begins to believe it. The poor often speak carelessly. They use sarcasm, self-deprecation, victimhood, and limitation as casual language. But every word leaves a mark, and over time those marks become mental boundaries. If you want to begin shifting, start with language. Catch yourself. Replace weakness with strength. Replace doubt with direction. Replace avoidance with accountability. It may feel unnatural at first, but remember, everything powerful begins as unfamiliar. Speak like the person you wish to become, and soon your life will echo that sound. Another habit that defines the wealthy is their relationship with feedback. They welcome correction. They invite criticism. They seek truth over comfort. Why? Because they see feedback not as attack, but as acceleration. Every piece of information is an opportunity to refine, to improve, to evolve. The poor mindset avoids feedback. It takes things personally. It defends ego over outcome. And in doing so, it blocks growth. But the wealthy have made peace with the discomfort of honesty. They ask hard questions. They track data. They measure results. They look at reality, not feelings. And because of that, they can adjust quickly. They course correct before things spiral. They evolve while others stay stuck. If you want to grow in any area, financial, physical, relational, become feedback hungry. Ask, where am I missing something? What do others see that I don't? How can I improve today, not someday? This humility is not weakness, it is wisdom, and it pays dividends. If you've come this far, there's a reason. You're not here by accident. Something in you knows that a shift is overdue, that your future demands a stronger foundation, that your time is too valuable to waste on small thinking and recycled excuses. So I challenge you, start applying what you've heard. Don't wait. Don't let the momentum fade. Take one habit from today's message and install it. Practice it. Repeat it. Let it sink into your bones, because the wealth you want is not out there. It's waiting inside a new version of you, one you already carry, one you're now ready to activate. There's a habit the wealthy practice that may seem paradoxical at first: strategic detachment. They have goals, yes. They have visions so clear they can feel them in their bones, but they do not cling to results with desperation. They do not grip outcomes so tightly that they strangle their own progress. Why? Because they understand that obsession with results often sabotages the very process required to achieve them. Desperation creates emotional interference. It clouds judgment. It breeds impatience. The wealthy focus on systems, not outcomes, on rituals, not rewards. They trust that if the foundation is right, the fruit will come. They work with urgency but not anxiety. They move with intensity but not fear. The poor, on the other hand, chase. They need the result to validate their effort, and when it doesn't come fast enough, they quit. They reroute. They doubt themselves. But the wealthy build like farmers. They water the soil, nurture the seed, and let the harvest come in its own season. This is not passivity. It is powerful patience. It's what allows them to outlast the hype, outperform the competition, and build something that endures. This detachment also shows up in how the wealthy handle opinions. They do not bend with every wind of feedback. They do not dilute their mission to appease the crowd. They listen, but they don't obey unless it aligns, because they've learned that public opinion is a lagging indicator. By the time the world praises you, you've already spent years building in silence. The poor seek validation early. They need applause at every step, and so they trade progress for approval. But the wealthy, they play a longer game. They'd rather be misunderstood now than misaligned forever. They'd rather be criticized for focus than praised for mediocrity. This is why their projects succeed. This is why their companies grow. This is why their lives feel stable, because they've anchored to principle, not popularity. You must learn to do the same. Praise is a sugar high. Vision is nourishment. Choose your fuel wisely. Another mental habit of the wealthy is asymmetrical thinking. While most people think in terms of work equals result, the wealthy think in terms of leverage. They ask, where can I apply effort that multiplies? Where can I build something once that pays me forever? This is the mindset behind passive income, digital assets, systems, intellectual property, investments. The poor trade time for money. The wealthy trade ideas for value and then automate that value. This doesn't mean they work less. Often they work harder, but they aim their energy at compounding assets. They're not chasing every opportunity. They're building structures that grow on their own, and once those structures are in place, they gain freedom, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, creatively. If you want to join that realm, begin asking this question daily. Is what I'm doing today scalable, repeatable, and aligned with the future I'm building? If not, it's a distraction. The mind of the wealthy isn't just productive, it's leveraged, and that makes all the difference. This leverage principle also applies to relationships. The wealthy understand that people are the greatest multiplier, so they build intentional networks. They're not collecting contacts, they're cultivating mutual elevation. They seek proximity to those who think bigger, act faster, execute stronger. Not to use them, but to become like them, because environment shapes identity, and people are environment. The poor cling to familiarity. They stay loyal to comfort zones and conversations that validate stagnation. But the wealthy are always upgrading the room they're in. They ask, does this relationship reinforce my standards or erode them? And if the answer is erosion, they respectfully distance. This isn't cold, it's strategic. Because every person in your life is either reminding you of your limits or activating your potential. Audit accordingly. Your circle is your mirror. Surround yourself with visionaries, and vision becomes natural. Surround yourself with mediocrity, and even greatness will feel out of place. Let's talk now about emotional control. This is one of the rarest and most essential habits of the wealthy. They have trained themselves not to be ruled by moods. Their actions are not dictated by how they feel, but by who they are. This doesn't mean they suppress emotion. It means they govern it. They feel fully but act wisely. They understand that emotional reaction is the death of momentum, so they pause, they reflect, they ask, what outcome do I want here? And then they choose their response accordingly. The poor, by contrast, are emotional puppets. They start things on fire when they're angry. They quit when they're tired. They lash out, shut down, explode, retreat. And in doing so, they forfeit progress for catharsis. But the wealthy, they channel energy. They remain calm under pressure. They move with precision because they've realized the man who masters emotion masters outcome, and that's a habit worth building. Another subtle but powerful habit is language precision. The wealthy are intentional with words. They understand that every word spoken is a command to the subconscious. So they don't say, I hope. They say, I will. They don't say, I can't. They ask, how can I? They speak life into their vision, power into their plan, clarity into their action. The poor use sloppy language, sarcasm, self-deprecation, limiting phrases, and then they wonder why their life reflects that tone. But the mind obeys language. And over time, your words become your walls or your wings. Audit your vocabulary, upgrade your declarations. Speak like a builder, not a beggar, and watch how your mind and your results begin to rise in response. There's one final habit for today that underlies all the rest: radical honesty. The wealthy are honest with themselves, brutally so. They don't pretend, they don't sugarcoat, they don't delay the truth. If they're off course, they admit it. If they've wasted time, they own it. If they've been undisciplined, they correct it. This honesty is not shame-based, it's responsibility-based. It says, I will not lie to myself because my future is too important. The poor often avoid this. They justify, they delay, they distract, and in doing so, they disconnect from the power to change. But the wealthy stay tethered to reality, because truth is leverage, and leverage, properly used, creates breakthrough. So today, where do you need to be more honest? What have you been avoiding? What needs to be said, done, changed? The longer you wait, the heavier it becomes. Speak the truth to yourself, and let that truth set you in motion. If this message clarified something for you, write it down now. Don't let clarity be a fleeting feeling. Turn it into commitment. Share it if it helped you. Let your circle rise with you. And remember, every mental habit you shift today becomes a cornerstone of the life you build tomorrow. The compound effect of alignment is unstoppable. There is one final mental habit that we must explore, one that undergirds all others, and without which even the strongest ambition withers: the habit of long-term thinking. The wealthy live in years, decades, even lifetimes. They are not seduced by what's immediate. They are obsessed with what's inevitable. They reverse engineer their lives from the outcome backward. While others ask, what can I get today? They ask, who do I need to become to create what will last? And from that question, everything changes. Their urgency becomes meaningful, not manic. Their patience becomes strategic, not passive. Their actions today become investments in a future they have already chosen. The poor often live in a constant cycle of reaction: bills, distractions, impulses, quick fixes. They trade the permanent for the temporary, and in doing so, they forfeit peace for pressure. But the wealthy, they delay the fruit to deepen the root. They make decisions that don't just serve this week, they serve the next generation. And that's the difference. It's not intensity, it's duration. Anyone can work hard for a month. Few can build wisely for a decade. That's what makes them uncommon. This long-term lens affects how they set goals. The wealthy do not chase random outcomes. They create vision frameworks. Every goal serves a larger ecosystem. Every quarter fits into a yearly arc. Every year ladders into a 5-year plan. This doesn't mean they predict every detail, but it means they direct the trajectory. They move with intention. The poor mindset sets goals emotionally. I want more money. I want to be free. I want to be happy. These are desires, not strategies. The wealthy translate desire into structure. They define what success looks like clearly. They assign numbers, milestones, timelines. They measure, they recalibrate, and in doing so they create certainty, not because they control the future, but because they prepare for it. They trust that if the system is solid, the result will arrive. That's why they don't panic when progress is slow, because they know a strong foundation takes longer to pour than a quick fix. And they're not here for fast, they're here for forever. The habit of long-term thinking also shapes how the wealthy deal with setbacks. When most people encounter failure, they stop. They question everything, they internalize the loss. But the wealthy have trained themselves to interpret failure in context. One bad day doesn't break a system. One missed target doesn't erase momentum. Because they've built time buffers into their expectations, they've accepted that the path is non-linear. that every dip, every stall, every misstep is expected on the way to mastery. The poor see failure as final. The wealthy see failure as feedback. It's not "I failed," it's "I found another variable to refine." This mindset doesn't just reduce stress, it preserves momentum. And momentum, once preserved, becomes exponential over time. Imagine what's possible if you didn't lose 3 months every time something went wrong. That's the edge the wealthy possess, not because they're perfect, but because they persist through imperfection without abandoning the process. And let's go deeper still. Long-term thinking influences how the wealthy build legacy. They don't just think in terms of success, they think in terms of succession. They ask, what systems can I build that outlive me? What values will remain when I'm gone? What ripple effect am I creating through my work, my family, my influence? This is where significance replaces survival, where purpose replaces pressure. And it's why the wealthiest people are often the most philanthropic, not out of guilt, but out of vision. Because when your cup overflows, you start asking, who can I fill? The poor mindset can barely think a month ahead, but the wealthy are asking questions about how their children's children will benefit from the work they're doing today. That's not just financial, it's foundational. They're writing a story that continues after the last page. And if you want to step into that realm, start now. Begin by asking, what would I do differently if I knew the next 10 years depended on it? Now, how do you build this habit practically? The answer is simple. Train your horizon. Set goals beyond 90 days. Build visions beyond 12 months. Develop habits that feel slow but scale endlessly. Delay gratification on purpose. Journal what your life looks like 3 years from now and ask yourself each day if your actions match that picture. Install systems that remove decision fatigue so you can focus on what compounds. And when distractions come, and they will, remind yourself this is a detour, not a destination. Train your brain to see the arc, not just the moment. That one shift alone will separate you from 99% of people who live only for now. There's one more element of long-term thinking that's rarely discussed but crucial: emotional economy. The wealthy do not waste emotion on things they can't control. They conserve energy for what matters. They do not spiral because a comment stung or a post underperformed or a deal fell through. Why? Because their sense of identity is not anchored in right now, it's anchored in the entire arc. They don't ask, how does this make me feel today? They ask, how does this fit into what I'm building? That's why they're so stable, so unmoved, so consistent. They've stopped outsourcing peace to outcomes, and instead they derive peace from alignment with their mission. This is not stoicism, it's strategy. Emotional energy is the currency of execution. Spend it wisely, guard it ruthlessly, and invest it only in what builds the future you've chosen. Let's bring this home. Every wealthy person you admire, every thinker, builder, creator, leader, has this habit at the core. They think in timelines longer than most people are willing to imagine. They think about how habits scale, how relationships compound, how brand and character outlast noise and novelty. And they live in a way that makes the future inevitable. You can begin this habit now. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to be famous. You need only to think longer, ask deeper questions, choose systems over thrills, identity over impulse, contribution over applause, and in doing so, you shift from survival to sovereignty. If you've made it this far, it's because a part of you is already ready for this new path. A part of you has already realized that being loved means nothing if it requires abandoning yourself. Real self-love begins the moment you choose you, even if it costs you comfort, approval, or connection. Even if it costs you being alone for a while. So tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even hated? In the name of your inner freedom, are you willing to pay the price of being you? If this message touched something in you, if it made sense, write in the comments, I choose my peace. Let's see how many of us are truly ready for this transition. And don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's more important than you think. I'll see you there. If you were to spend a single day shadowing a self-made millionaire, not the flashy type, but the kind who built a life from discipline, vision, and relentless mental refinement, you'd notice something curious. They don't think the same way most people do. They don't speak the same way. They don't even respond to problems the same way. Where others see obstacles, they see patterns. Where others panic, they pause. Their power doesn't come from always having the right answers. It comes from asking the right questions. Instead of why is this happening to me, they ask, what can I learn from this? Instead of can I afford this, they ask, how can I create the value to earn it? These subtle shifts in language reveal the deeper habit, the habit of self-directed thinking. While the masses wait for someone to tell them what to think, the wealthy develop the discipline of independent thought. They don't outsource their vision. They don't let circumstance write their script. They take full ownership of their mental inputs and outputs because they understand that what enters the mind shapes what emerges in life. One of the great tragedies of modern life is that people confuse information with wisdom. We are drowning in data but starving for clarity. Every day we are bombarded with opinions, algorithms, and endless comparisons. And most people unknowingly let that flood of noise program their expectations, their standards, and their goals. But the wealthy? They guard their minds like a fortress. They are ruthless with their attention. They filter what they consume because they understand that the mind is fertile ground and everything you allow in becomes a seed. Some seeds grow into confidence, clarity, and action. Others into fear, confusion, and doubt. And over time, those seeds bloom into realities. The wealthy cultivate their mental environment with precision. They choose books over gossip, silence over noise, vision over distraction. If you want to rise, if you want to break free from the gravitational pull of mediocrity, you must learn to be equally discerning, because the mind, once programmed, will act like a machine. It will find evidence to match its instructions, and it will reject anything that contradicts its coding. So ask yourself today, what have I been allowing in? What am I feeding my mind with? And more importantly, what is it silently building? The poor mindset, by contrast, is often passive. It waits, it reacts, it takes the shape of its surroundings. It's influenced by what's trending, what's familiar, what's easy. But passivity is expensive. It costs time, it costs energy, and it costs dreams. Wealth demands that you become the architect of your thoughts, that you think on purpose, not by default. This doesn't mean you must have all the answers. It means you begin to ask better questions. You begin to sit with your thoughts. You begin to notice your own patterns and interrupt them when they do not serve you. This is where freedom begins, not in the bank account, but in the brain, not in the external conditions, but in the internal conductor that orchestrates your responses. Remember this, the world you see is filtered through the lens of your beliefs. If you believe you're a victim, you will find oppression everywhere. If you believe you are capable, opportunities will appear where others see roadblocks. And belief is not magic, it's programming. It is cultivated through repetition, visualization, and environment. So the question is not whether you are programmed. The question is, by who and for what? The wealthy habitually reprogram themselves. Every day, they do it with intention, with repetition, with solitude. They don't rely on chance motivation or fleeting inspiration. They install their mindset like a craftsman sharpens his tools, carefully, daily, deliberately. They write their goals in present tense. They visualize outcomes as already real. They speak as though the future is inevitable, because in their mind it is. This creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, where the brain, once convinced of a new identity, begins to reject anything that conflicts with that vision. So action naturally follows. The body obeys the mind. Behavior follows belief, and results become predictable. If you've ever wondered why two people with the same opportunity produce wildly different outcomes, it's not luck, it's not IQ, it's alignment. One is internally programmed to succeed, the other is internally programmed to stay the same. One has a mind that supports the next level, the other has a mind that protects the familiar. And the good news, programming can be rewritten, starting today, if you're willing to go within. Let's make this practical. If you want to begin the habit of self-directed thinking, start by creating a mental gatekeeper. Imagine that every idea, every opinion, every piece of information must pass through a filter before entering your subconscious. Ask, does this empower me or disempower me? Does this move me toward my goals or away from them? Would the person I want to become believe this? If the answer is no, reject it, remove it, replace it. This might mean unfollowing, unplugging, deleting, or distancing. And yes, it might feel uncomfortable, but growth always demands a shedding. You cannot become someone new while clinging to the comforts of who you used to be. The wealthy do this naturally. They curate their influences. They surround themselves with voices of conviction, not confusion. They prioritize ideas that stretch them, not sedate them. And over time, their mind becomes a sanctuary, not a circus. That's the goal. Not perfection, not performance, but clarity. A mind so aligned with purpose that it begins to generate solutions, strategies, and confidence on its own. That's the habit. And once it's in place, your external life cannot help but reflect it. There's something else I want you to grasp. Every mental habit is either a weapon or a weakness. There is no neutral ground. Your thought patterns are either equipping you to thrive or keeping you on a loop of frustration. One thought repeated daily becomes belief. Belief becomes behavior. Behavior becomes results, and results reinforce belief. That's the loop. That's the algorithm. And if you don't interrupt the pattern, you will live the same year 40 times and call it a life. That's not what you were made for. You were made to grow, to evolve, to master yourself, to bring forth the vision planted inside you by design. But that vision can only emerge through the lens of a trained mind. That's what separates the wealthy, not the money, but the internal calibration that money simply amplifies. Money doesn't change people, it exposes them. And if your mental habits are rooted in fear, blame, or avoidance, money will only make the cracks louder. But if your habits are rooted in discipline, clarity, and growth, money becomes a magnifier of impact. So focus on the root, focus on the seed, because what grows next depends on it. Think of your thoughts as tenants. They either pay rent or drain resources. The wealthy evict thoughts that do not serve. They do not entertain, what if I fail? They ask, what must I become to succeed? They do not ask, can I afford it? They ask, how can I afford it? Every question changes the state of your mind, and the state of your mind changes your access to resources, creativity, and action. If you want better answers, ask better questions, and if you want better outcomes, build better questions into your daily thinking. This is not about being positive, it's about being powerful. Positivity can be a mask, but mental strength is forged in the quiet choice to take control of your internal world, especially when the external world is uncertain. That's what the wealthy do, and that's what you can begin doing now. If any of this resonated with you, take a moment to write it down. Put it somewhere visible. Let it become a new groove in your mental landscape. And if you're serious about this shift, share it, not just for vanity, but because repetition builds identity. Let the act of sharing become a declaration of your new direction. And most importantly, keep going, because the mind you train today is the life you live tomorrow. One of the most powerful distinctions between those who remain stuck and those who rise to financial independence is how they interpret pain, not physical pain necessarily, but the emotional friction that comes from discomfort, challenge, and rejection. The wealthy have learned to reinterpret pain, not as punishment, but as proof that they are stretching, proof that they are breaking old patterns, proof that they are building something worth having. Pain is their compass. When it shows up, they lean in. The poor mindset, on the other hand, withdraws, it recoils. It waits for the pain to stop before moving forward again. But growth is born inside discomfort. Wealth is constructed inside repetition that often feels boring, lonely, and invisible. If you require it to feel good before you act, you will never build anything of substance. This is the habit. Embrace discomfort as a signal, not a stop sign. Feel it, understand it, and then move anyway. Because the life you want sits on the other side of 1,000 small moments where you did what was right, even when it wasn't easy. Now let's take that one step deeper. The wealthy habitually choose their pain. They preempt it. They don't wait for crisis to force growth. They manufacture controlled adversity. They wake up early before the world demands it. They train their body before it breaks down. They track their spending before debt becomes a prison. They have hard conversations before silence turns to resentment. They sacrifice comfort voluntarily so that pain never arrives as an emergency, and this is a critical mindset shift. Pain will visit either way. You can choose it now in the form of discipline, or you can suffer it later in the form of regret. That is the equation. That is the hidden tax of procrastination. The poor seek ease, and they pay with stagnation. The wealthy seek challenge, and they are paid with strength. This is not motivational fluff. It is mathematical reality. What you avoid compounds in cost. What you confront compounds in reward. So decide today, which pain do you want, now while you can control it, or later when it controls you? Another thing to consider, the wealthy interpret boredom differently. While most people see boredom as a signal to escape, open the phone, check the feed, distract the mind, the wealthy see boredom as a sign that they're on the right path. They understand that greatness is not built in peak moments, but in quiet, repetitive discipline. The act of investing, training, studying, building, done over and over again without immediate reward is what constructs resilience. The poor look for stimulation, the wealthy look for structure. This is the invisible separator, because in a world addicted to novelty, mastery becomes a superpower, repetition without applause, commitment without recognition, showing up when no one is watching. These are not glamorous habits, but they are the bedrock of wealth. If you find yourself bored, don't flee. Lean in, let it train your focus, let it deepen your roots, because the future doesn't belong to the entertained, it belongs to the disciplined. And discipline, contrary to popular belief, is not about restriction, it's about direction. It's the ability to make your present self submit to the demands of your future self. The wealthy understand this. They have trained themselves to obey their own vision. When the alarm goes off, they rise, not because they feel like it, but because they've decided who they are. When the opportunity arises, they invest, not because it's convenient, but because it aligns with their trajectory. Discipline is not willpower, it's identity execution. It's the choice to act in accordance with the person you've decided to become, even when emotion says otherwise. This is why the wealthy rarely feel like it. They've learned to move anyway. And with each movement, their mind becomes stronger, more aligned, more stable. The poor wait for motivation. The wealthy operate from mission. One is reactive, the other is rooted, and the difference echoes through every result they produce. Let's talk now about consistency. It's one of the least celebrated habits of the wealthy, yet it's the most responsible for their success. Consistency is boring, it's unsexy, it doesn't go viral, but it's what builds. The poor mindset looks for explosive effort, a big leap, a perfect week, a life-changing event. But those are illusions. The wealthy build with brick-by-brick consistency. They deposit into their vision every day, not with fireworks, but with faithfulness, a morning routine, a savings habit, a content schedule, a reading rhythm, a tracking system. These things sound small, but small things repeated with purpose create unstoppable momentum. And momentum, once built, is the most powerful asset in the world. It protects against doubt, it pushes through fatigue, it rewires identity. If you want to separate yourself, stop chasing intensity. Start honoring consistency. The results will be inevitable. There's another overlooked habit of the wealthy: strategic reflection. They do not just work, they review. They take time to look back, to ask, what worked this week? Where did I drift? What needs adjustment? The poor avoid reflection because it requires confronting the truth. It reveals inefficiency, distraction, and emotional reactivity. But the wealthy crave truth because they know that truth is leverage. One adjustment in strategy can be worth 10 times more than blind effort. This is not overthinking. It's optimized thinking. It's stepping outside the day-to-day and aligning your behavior with your blueprint. Weekly reviews, monthly assessments, quarterly recalibrations. These are not luxuries. They are rituals of the elite. If you want to join them, adopt the habit of reflection. Put time on the calendar. Make it sacred, because in those quiet moments of review, your next level is revealed. And finally, for now, let's talk about vision integrity. The wealthy don't just have a vision, they live in alignment with it. Every decision they make is filtered through one question: does this move me closer to who I've decided to become? If the answer is no, they walk away. No matter how tempting, no matter how easy, this is integrity. It's not about being good, it's about being congruent. It's about refusing to betray the person you've declared you are. The poor compromise their vision for comfort. The wealthy sacrifice comfort for vision, and that is the ultimate difference. Not intelligence, not background, not opportunity, but the daily repeated ruthless choice to stay aligned. You can have what you want, but only if you're willing to become what it requires. So if something in this part of the message spoke to you, pause and write it down. Let it burn into your mental wiring. Share it, revisit it, speak it aloud. Because what we reinforce, we remember, and what we remember, we begin to live. Wealth is not an event, it's a habit system, and you've just added another brick to your foundation. There is a moment in every journey, quiet, often unnoticed, where a person makes a vow not to the world but to themselves. A vow that says, I will no longer abandon my future for the comfort of now. This vow marks the beginning of transformation. And those who build wealth, real wealth, not just in money but in spirit and purpose, are the ones who renew that vow every day through action. At the root of this shift is a habit the wealthy hold sacred, the habit of identity reinforcement. While the average person is constantly reacting to their circumstances, changing with the weather of the world, the wealthy anchor themselves in a chosen identity and behave from it consistently. They don't wait to feel confident to take action. They act confidently, and confidence catches up. They don't wait to be told who they are. They decide it and then demonstrate it. This is the reversal. The poor seek evidence before belief. The wealthy believe first and act accordingly. And through that action, they produce the evidence they need. This mental inversion is what allows them to move when others stall, to persist when others quit, because they're not reacting to the world, they're projecting identity into it. You must understand, the human brain is always trying to stay congruent with its dominant self-image. This is a survival function. The subconscious mind, once imprinted with a definition of who I am, will fight to maintain it, whether that identity is empowering or limiting. That means if you believe you're undisciplined, your mind will sabotage your efforts at routine. If you believe you're bad with money, your behavior will unconsciously support that belief. But if you change the image, if you write a new script, the mind begins to behave in harmony with that script. The wealthy do this with precision. They reinforce identity through affirmations, habits, and visualizations that align with their vision. They speak in first-person present tense, saying, "I am decisive, I am consistent, I am a builder of wealth," not as wishful thinking, but as mental programming. And it works. Not because the words are magic, but because the brain cannot distinguish between imagination and reality. What you rehearse becomes your reference, what you visualize becomes your instinct, and this is not mysticism, it's mechanics. Every great performer, leader, and entrepreneur trains their subconscious like an athlete trains the body, and you can too. Let's make this actionable. Choose one identity today, one trait, one future version of you that you want to become. Then ask, how would this version of me think? How would they speak? What would they prioritize? And then act from that place, not just once, but consistently. This is called identity-based living. You're no longer waiting for permission. You're no longer hoping to change. You are becoming by behaving. This mental habit, when repeated, creates something extraordinary, internal stability. While others are tossed by trends, moods, and opinions, you remain anchored. You are not immune to chaos, but you are not ruled by it either. You have a center, and from that center you build. That's what makes a person unshakable, not that life gets easier, but that the mind gets stronger. The wealthy walk through storms with this quiet certainty, not because the storm is weaker, but because their anchor is deeper, and that anchor is identity. But identity alone is not enough. It must be paired with another elite habit, environmental design. The wealthy do not leave their surroundings to chance. They craft their environment to support their vision. They understand that willpower is a finite resource, but environment is a continuous influence. So they design their homes, their schedules, their relationships to reflect the future, not the past. Books are within reach, distractions are removed, conversations are intentional. Even the music, lighting, and layout are curated to reinforce who they've decided to become. The poor often underestimate this. They keep toxic influences close, they tolerate clutter, they absorb negativity, and then wonder why their mindset deteriorates. But your environment is not neutral. It is a mirror. It either whispers your future or echoes your past. So choose, curate, align, build a world that reflects your highest self, and your behavior will begin to rise in response. Let's go further. The wealthy also train themselves in the habit of financial literacy. This doesn't mean knowing every investment trick. It means mastering the foundational laws of money, where it flows, why it grows, and how to multiply it. They understand that money is not emotional. It is behavioral. It is the natural result of service, strategy, and structure. So they track their spending. They assign every dollar a purpose. They build systems for saving, investing, and giving. They think in terms of percentages, not just amounts. They ask, what portion of this check goes to my future, not how much can I spend right now. The poor avoid money conversations. The wealthy have them early and often, because they know what you avoid controls you, what you confront you control. So begin now. Open the spreadsheet, look at the truth, design your system, and most importantly, stay consistent. Because financial mastery is not about complexity, it's about clarity repeated. Another rare habit among the wealthy is their approach to energy management. They understand that time is not their greatest asset, energy is. Because two people may have the same 24 hours, but the one with higher focus, vitality, and emotional clarity will create 10 times the result. So they treat their energy like royalty. They sleep like it's sacred. They fuel their body with intention. They train physically not for appearance, but for capacity. They remove draining people, habits, and commitments that create leaks. And they build in recovery, not as a reward, but as a ritual. The poor burn out. The wealthy burn strategically. This habit alone can double your output without adding a single minute to your schedule, because it's not about doing more, it's about doing better, with higher presence, sharper clarity, and deeper alignment. Protect your energy like your future depends on it, because it does. And finally, the wealthy embrace a habit that most ignore, delayed celebration. They understand that real success is not built on dopamine spikes, but on long arcs of mastery. So they delay the reward. They finish the project before the vacation. They hit the savings goal before the splurge. They build the routine before the celebration. Why? Because they know that celebration without foundation is fragile. It creates an addiction to validation, not to process. But when you learn to celebrate consistency, to enjoy progress itself, you become unstoppable. The poor celebrate early and then quit. The wealthy celebrate late and continue. This is the essence of sustained greatness, loving the process more than the prize. If you can train your mind to find joy in the repetition, to smile while building in the dark, then you've already won, because results will chase the one who no longer needs them to feel fulfilled. So pause here and reflect. Which habit in today's message spoke to you the most? Identity? Environment? Financial clarity? Energy? Delayed celebration? Choose one. Master it, let it reshape how you move. And if this message stirred something in you, something deeper than inspiration, let it echo. Write it down, share it, anchor it, because knowledge unpracticed is noise, but knowledge applied becomes power.